Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am here with a January wrap-up, and January was a spectacular reading month. So I went from being in what was one of my worst reading slumps ever to reading 9 books. So I'm pretty excited about that. So anyways, let's get into the books. So the first book that I read in January was The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell. This was beautiful. So this is a really lovely short story collection, and it's very kind of magical realism-y, fairy tale-esque, just kind of very interesting. Interesting is the best word, because some of the stories were just so beautiful, and some of them I was like, whoa, now what's happening? This is a little creepy, but all in a very well-told way. So Jen is just a spectacular writer, and this is no exception. So if you've been considering picking this up and you like kind of creepy dark things or whimsical magical realism, kind of just odd things, I think this is a really good pick. My favorite in here was the one where the little boy writes the letter to the weather woman. I thought that one was really, really charming. Next up, I picked up Neon Green by Margaret Wappler, and this one was so good. So it is not, or it wasn't exactly what I was expecting it to be. So I found out about this book on Mercedes' channel, and I just thought the cover was so stunning and just eye-catching, and also the premise sounded really interesting. Basically, it's set in the 80s, and it's kind of an alternate 80s timeline because there are aliens, so you can win a contest, or you can somehow get in touch with this company and they will let an alien saucer land in your backyard, and it just stays there. So I kind of thought that this was going to be more about, you know, what the aliens are and that kind of thing. It's totally not. So it has that really interesting factor of, what are these aliens here for? What are they doing? Are there actually aliens in that spaceship? But it's also this really incredible character-driven family saga. And that is what really drew me in, is because you have this family who's at a really tumultuous time in their lives. So they're environmentalists, and the dad is really, really serious about environmentalism and doing everything really clean and natural. And then this spaceship shows up in their backyard, and this is all in the back. It's basically like spewing green goo and just in general being the opposite of everything that he stands for. And so it causes this big rift in their family, and it's really fascinating look at family in a really difficult time in their lives. So there is one thing that I would say is a trigger warning on this, but it's also a spoiler. I don't really know how to handle that. I'm going to put it down in the down bar, so if you want to know what it is a little bit of a spoiler for something that happens in the book, but at the same time I think it's really important that if this is something that you or a loved one has gone through, that you know that it's in there, because I think that it could be potentially very upsetting. So definitely gonna put that in the down bar in case you are interested in knowing what that is before you go into it. But I would say this is just, if you're interested in family sagas, this is really great. I think it has that little bit of a sci-fi tinge to it, but it's more literary fiction, in my opinion, than science fiction. And then I started reading The Sea Change by S.M. Wheeler. This was a book that I got in a blind date with a book from Malaprops, I think 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, I'm not really sure. This just turned out to be way too weird for me. So I was listening to the audiobook of it, and the first part of it I was enjoying. So it's about this little girl who, she has a birthmark on her face, which people think means she is a witch or a demon or something like that. So she's treated very differently by the society that she lives in. And she finds comfort in the sea, where she meets this kraken. And so she has this friendship with this kraken. They speak to each other, so it's got that magical realism aspect to it. And then the Kraken goes missing and she leaves home and it goes on this like crazy adventure. I got out halfway, well, not even halfway through the part where she has left home and the way that she, and kind of what she's doing, and it just got way, way too weird. I think if you are a really big fan of some of the weirder things that Neil Gaiman does, you might enjoy this, but I ended up DNFing it about 100 pages in because it was too weird for me. So next I participated in the Winter Biannual Bibliothon, and I picked up The English Wife. I actually read this kind of right before going into the readathon, and this was one of the books that I have been highly anticipated. I'm a huge fan of Lauren Willig. I've read everything pretty much that she's ever written. I will link down below an author spotlight that I did on her a long time ago that talks about some of her other books. This was really interesting. I was lucky enough to get this from St. Martin's Press early, and I liked this. I would say this is not necessarily her strongest book. So this is basically the story of it's this sister who, her brother and his wife are found missing or murdered, and she is trying to unravel what happened and whether he was in fact murdered or he killed himself, or what really happened on this night in the kind of garden. So it follows dual timelines. So it follows the sister as she's sort of finding out information about what happened, and then it follows the wife of her brother as she meets him. So it kind of, and so the timelines sort of collide in a way, which is something that Lauren Willig does really well. I thought the characters were really interesting in this, and I may or may not have spoiled myself a little bit for the ending, which probably had a little bit to do with my lessened enjoyment of it, but I just thought this was a little bit more dramatic than some of her other things, in not the best way. I liked it, and I think I still gave it like 3.5, 4 stars, but if you're gonna start with Lauren Willig, I don't think this is the best place to start. I would definitely recommend something like the Ashford Affair, or even her Pink Carnation series as a starting point rather than this one. Still good, still classic Lauren Willig, but not her best work. Next, I picked up The Best Polish Restaurant in Buffalo, and I swear it takes everything in me not to call it The Best Polish Sausage in Buffalo. I think it's because of the cover, but that's beside the point. But this I thought was a really interesting story about an immigrant's journey and a family saga. So I read a lot of stories that I would consider family sagas this month, but it was really lovely. So it told the story in 2 parts again, from the perspective of the great-grandmother, I think she is, who came over from Poland to escape the persecution of, it wasn't Nazi persecution, it was before that, so maybe Russian? I don't know. It was right around the First World War, and tells her story and how she goes from, you know, coming over from Poland and having absolutely nothing to building up this business. And then it tells the story of the descendant of her family as the business that she built is collapsing, essentially. And so we're hearing, you know, her story, but we're also hearing how her story has affected her descendants. And it's a really fascinating perspective, because you're seeing all of her pain and her hard work, and you're seeing, you know, the grateful and the ungrateful of her descendants, which I thought was really interesting. It was definitely a story that I would recommend, and I could not put it down. I read this, I think, in like 2 days, and I really, really enjoyed this, so I would absolutely recommend this one. Next up is the 14th book in the Animorphs series. So this one, I probably want to get to like 25, because that's about the halfway point. I'm going to do like a look back at all of the books. that I've read so far, but I read these when I was a teenager and apparently only read like 9 of them because I don't remember the majority of the story after that point. But these are just fun, light reads, middle grade, about a bunch of teenagers who are given the power to morph into animals and bugs and things like that. Basically, they're fighting this alien force that is invading Earth. And this one was just what I would say classic middle grade humor. There were horses infested by yerks, and there was space toilet humor. So it's pretty far into the series, so I don't want to say a whole lot, even though it's Animorphs, so I don't feel like I can really spoil it that much, but it was funny. And then the only book that I acquired this month, I actually managed to read this month, and that is Pilot X. I got this in my book bath box, and I absolutely love the cover. Like, this is gorgeous and may have had a little bit to do with me going ahead and picking it up, though I have been in a really big sci-fi kick recently. This is about a pilot, a man named X, who basically is part of a race that can hop between time. So they invented time travel, or they discovered time travel, and so his race hops around the galaxy through time trying to make things right, essentially, is what you're supposed to believe, and things kind of ensue from there. He is your quintessential kind of renegade in that he starts finding things out, starts wanting to change things. And we start the book by essentially finding out that he has used some device to obliterate his entire race, and so he is essentially the only one of his race that still remains. And then we go back to the beginning, and it starts telling the story of how this happened, what led to this, and how he came to do this thing. The one criticism I would have of this is that once we get to the point where once we get to the point where we find out how it happened and why it happened, the book just ends. Like, there's not any what happens next, which I thought was really jarring. I don't know, typically when a book starts out telling you how it's going to end, you then find out how it got to that point, and then you find out where you go from there. That didn't really happen here, and so it felt really abrupt, the ending. I thought that the concept and the different races were really interesting, and I enjoyed the book, kind of the progression of the book, but I just thought the ending was really weird and abrupt. 2 more books to go. The next one is The Two Family Home, or The Two Family House, and this one I listened to on audiobook and really enjoyed the audiobook. I thought it was really fantastically narrated. This again is a family saga about 2 families so the husbands are brothers, and they live in a kind of, it's a 2-family house, so it's like a duplex, but one's on the bottom, one's on the top, and it follows their relationship. So the 2 wives are really good friends at the beginning of the book, and then one night there is a blizzard, and so they're both pregnant at the same time. There's a blizzard, their husbands are away, and they both give birth on the same night, and something happens. So they both have healthy children, they're both healthy, but something happens. You basically know when it happens what happened because of the lead up to it and then everything that happens after that, but it's not actually revealed to the rest of the characters until near the end. And it just follows how this choice that was made affects the 2 families and these women going forward, and it is heartbreaking. So it's set in like the early 1900s, I believe, and the characterizations were really thought-provoking, and the family drama of it just really made you think about the time that it was set in, but also about the kind of family dynamics and everything. And definitely, if you're at all a crier, have your tissues ready, because I cried like 6 times during this book. It broke my heart. So I would definitely recommend this one if you're into family sagas. So the last physical book that I read this month was Spinning by Tilly Walden. This is a graphic memoir. It's about her time growing up and about her experience with being a competitive figure skater. And it has this kind of gray purple color palette, and these pops of yellow are in there, which the pops of yellow I found to be a little bit jarring. It didn't really go or meld with the color palette very well. Which is just a minor criticism, but with graphic novels, those kind of things can affect your reading experience. But basically this is about her time. So it tells a lot about her as a figure skater, but also about her growing up and coming to terms with herself and her sexuality. So if you're into coming of age stories, I think this might be something that you really enjoy. I would say it's not the strongest graphic memoir that I've ever read. Honor Girl and El Defo, I think, have much more impact. This one sort of felt like it meandered along, and the ending was just sort of abrupt and anticlimactic. But I think that as a coming-of-age story, it's something that had a lot of interesting merit and made you think about some of the things that people go through, especially in competitive sports. And then the last thing that I actually finished this pretty early in the month, was the final book in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. So the last book in the realm of the Elderlings arc. Bittersweet, because obviously I love these characters and I don't want to let them go. But at the same time, it was really fun to see the conclusion of the story for all of these characters, how all of these worlds and people and magic systems came together to really make what happens happen was fascinating. I think Robin Hobb did a really beautiful job of bringing it all together. There were some great characters in this last trilogy that I really loved. Obviously I can't say a whole lot about it, just because it is the final trilogy in a huge arc that would be full of spoilers. I can say, for anybody who's read it, that the bird was one of my favorite characters throughout this whole arc. Is good God, will Fitz ever learn? Honestly, will he ever learn? I applaud Robin Hobb for having a character that is so deeply flawed, but at the same time I wanted to smack sense into him so many times. So yeah, that bird made me happy. I listened to it on audiobook obviously, and the narrator did just such a great job with especially the voice for the bird. It made me laugh every time. And every time my husband tells me how stupid Fitz is, I just walk around behind him going, "Stupid Fitz, stupid Fitz," because I can't help myself. So yeah. So I'd love to hear what you read this month. If you've read any of these, let me know what you thought. And just as kind of a note, because I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, I do link all of the books that I've read or talked about in a video down below. So if you're ever interested in finding them, the book depository links are in the down bar, along with all of my social media links. And yeah, I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.